Some of the scariest stories aren't about monsters or ghosts, but about the things we can't explain. Tonight's story is about a strange substitute teacher that no one remembered hiring. Yet years later, every student from his class began to vanish, one by one. Make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more scary stories. I grew up in a small rural town, one of those places where nothing ever really happens. We had a single high school, a single middle school, and one tiny elementary school. Everyone knew each other, which is probably why the story I'm about to tell still haunts me. There should have been no way for something like this to go unnoticed. When I was 12, my class had a substitute teacher one day. It was random, unannounced. None of the usual teachers had mentioned being sick, and we never saw a car in the lot that didn't belong. He just appeared. He was tall, unnervingly tall, with pale skin that looked like it hadn't seen the sun in years. His clothes were wrong. They weren't dirty or torn, but they didn't fit. His shirt sleeves hung too short on his long arms, and his pants seemed stretched too tight, like they weren't made for him. Nobody said a word when he walked in. He didn't introduce himself, didn't write his name on the board. He just stood there, staring at us with watery gray eyes, until the silence became unbearable. And then, in this hoarse voice, he began teaching. I don't remember what the lesson was about. None of us do. That's the weird part. Everyone in class that day, the kids, even the few who are still alive, we all remember sitting there, watching him scribble shapes and symbols on the chalkboard. Not words, not math, just shapes, circles within circles, lines crossing in ways that made no sense. But the second the bell rang, it was gone. Like fog burned away by the sun. We didn't talk about it. We didn't even think to. It was as if someone had taken a pair of scissors to our memory. The strangest thing? When we went back to school the next day, none of the teachers mentioned a substitute being there. It was like he'd never existed. For years, it was just one of those eerie childhood memories that you bury. Until the disappearances started. The first one was a girl named Allison. She was in my class that day, sitting 2 rows over. She vanished on October 17th, 15 years later. No signs of struggle. Her apartment door was locked from the inside. Her phone, wallet, and keys were still there. It was like she'd just walked out of her skin. At first, nobody thought much of it. People go missing. But then the next year, on the exact same day, David, another one of us from that class, disappeared. Same circumstances, same date. By the 3rd year, when it was Patrick, people started noticing the pattern. The police tried to investigate, but what could they do? There was no evidence, no leads, just a growing list of adults who had once been 12-year-olds in the same classroom, all vanishing one by one. That's when the nightmares started for me. Every October, as the date drew closer, I'd see him again in my sleep, the substitute, standing at the chalkboard, drawing those symbols that I still couldn't understand. Sometimes I'd wake up to the sound of chalk dragging across plaster, even though there was no chalkboard in my room. I tried to ignore it. Tried to convince myself it was just fear eating away at me. But then I realized something terrifying. The disappearances weren't random. They were happening in order, alphabetical order. I counted the names. I saw where I fell. My last name starts with M. This year, I was next. October 17th arrived. I didn't go to work, didn't leave my apartment. I sat with every light on, a baseball bat in my hands, and waited for something to happen. Midnight came and went. I thought maybe, just maybe I was safe. But around 3 a.m., I heard it. The sound of chalk, dragging across a board, coming from my living room. My heart dropped. I crept out of my bedroom and peeked around the corner. And there he was, the substitute, standing in my living room, impossibly tall, his head nearly brushing the ceiling. His back was to me, but his long arm moved mechanically, scratching symbols onto the wall with a piece of white chalk that hadn't been there before. I wanted to run, scream, do anything, but my body froze. He stopped writing. Slowly, his head turned. Not his body, just his head. Until those gray, milky eyes were staring straight at me. And then, in that same hoarse voice I remembered from when I was 12, he whispered, "Lesson's not over." The lights in my apartment flickered. The walls seemed to breathe. The floor stretched and warped beneath me until suddenly I was standing in a classroom again. My old classroom. Desks in neat rows. Chalkboard covered in circles and symbols. Every seat was filled. Allison, David, Patrick. All of them were there. The missing ones. They turned to look at me. Their faces blank. Their eyes gray like his. The substitute pointed to an empty desk in the front row. "For you?" he said. I don't remember sitting down. One moment I was standing, the next I was at that desk, staring up at the chalkboard as he began the lesson again. This time I understood the shapes, and I wish I hadn't. Because they weren't just drawings. They were maps, instructions. Each symbol a step in a process I can't describe without feeling like my brain is rotting. It wasn't knowledge meant for humans. It wasn't teaching. It was rewriting. I don't know how I got back. I woke up in my bed, soaked in sweat. The chalk symbols burned into my mind. But something's wrong. I looked in the mirror this morning, and my eyes weren't the same color they used to be. They're gray now. And when I smile, it doesn't feel like mine. The others, they didn't disappear. They just became part of the lesson. And now, so have I.